Hello everyone. In this video I thought I would just kind of take a break from the basic fundamental Python videos that I've been doing and throw one in here that is designed to keep people that watch these videos excited about the language and some of the things that you can do with it. Because when you're just learning the basics, it can be frustrating and it can be challenging to stay motivated. So I thought I'd throw one in that kind of shows you some of the exciting things that you can do. And this video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can edit multiple files with Python. And one of the things that I've found myself doing in my day-to-day work is occasionally I'll have to create variations of product photos where the basic product is the same, but there's some element about the product that's different. And I thought a good example would be t-shirts. So in this demonstration, I want you to imagine that you're trying to create product photos for a company that sells t-shirts online, and the t-shirts are customized with people's names. They can put their names on the t-shirt, or they can call in an order or send in an order or fill out a form online, and then the company prints the name on the t-shirt. Well, you might want to have multiple images of different t-shirts with different names on them on their website. So how are you going to create all of those images? Well, you could do them one at a time by hand, or you can write a Python program that does that for you. And that's really what we're going to demonstrate in this video. You'll see here that I have three shirts, and one of them's a duplicate, so let me close that and get you a different one here. Alright, we'll just do it this way. Okay, so you'll see here that we have three different shirts with three different names on the shirts. And really, if you scroll through here, you'll see that there is a bunch of shirts and each one has a different name on it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create these shirts. We're going to generate them using a Python script, and we're going to only install one third-party module to do that. So let me show you the file structure here that I'm going to be working with in this demonstration video. The structure is basically going to be like this, and you'll see that I have the program, the file that we're going to write the program in. I have a fonts directory, and if you go in there, you'll see that I have variations of a font called Dancing Script, and this is basically a free font that you can download from Google Fonts. And then I have a data file that has a CSV in it that has two columns, and there's a name column and there's a gender column. We're only going to use the name column, but that the file itself has two columns in it. We're only going to use the one, but that I'm going to show you that other column is in there for a specific reason that I'll talk about when we get to the part where we're writing the program. And then finally we have a base directory that has three blank t-shirts in it. I got these images off of pixabay.com, and I will have the links to each of these originals in the description of this video. I should let you know that a little bit of prep work was needed for these photos because the area that we're going to write the name on needs to be in the same location on each of these images. So I opened them with GIMP and put each image on a layer, and then I took about 5 minutes to just line up the printable area. So each of these images has the printable area right in the middle. And that's going to be handy because it's going to make it easier for us to line up our text when we put the text on these images. So that's basically the file structure. You can see two pip files in here, which these are pipenv files that basically indicate that I'm going to run this in a virtual environment. So enough about the file structure. Let's get into the demonstration. So here I have two windows open like I normally do. I have a notepad on the left and I have PowerShell on the right. PowerShell is in a t-shirt sayings directory, and when you ls the contents of that directory, you see the same thing that we just looked at in the Explorer window. There's my file structure. You'll see that the app file, the app.py file, has no data in it, and that is this file right here. Well, we have our notepad open here. We want to import some basic packages or modules. We want to open some modules to work with in this. And one of the main ones that you'll find yourself working with quite a bit is the OS module. That module is for working with the operating system, and we're going to use it to manage our paths to these folders that we just looked at in that Explorer window a moment ago. Another module that we're going to need is the CSV module. As you noted, as we talked about, there's a names CSV, and we want to be able to read that. Another one, these are all standard modules that come with Python, by the way. None of these are third party, so you don't have to install these. They're already in Python. The next one is random. We're going to pick the images randomly. You don't have to do this, but I thought it would be interesting just to kind of throw in how you can pull random elements out of a list. And so I'm going to do that with the 3 base t-shirts that we have. We're going to be writing on 3 different base t-shirts, and we don't want to write on the same one every time. We're just going to pull one of them out of the list randomly as we cycle through the CSV. So that's what we're going to use the random module for. And then we're going to import some code from a third-party module that we are going to install. And I've already installed it, but I'll show you how to do it. And that is, we're going to import from PIL. It's short for pillow. It's a long story of why it's called pill and not pillow, and why the package that we're going to install is called pillow. So I won't get into all that, but it's basically been forked, and the code for it has been split into 2 pieces, and the newer one is the one that we're going to use. So from pill, from that module, we're going to import image. We're going to import the image code. We're going to import the image draw, because we're going to be drawing on an image, and we're going to import image font. We're going to import all 3 of those, and so that's it for our imports. That's all we need to import for our program that we're going to be writing. So the first thing that I like to do at the top of my files when I'm working with directory structures is I like to map out where everything is going to be. And I almost always start with the main directory that the program itself is in. And so to do that, we're going to create a variable called mdir, and I'm just going to use os path abs path. This is the module, and it has code for paths in it, and we're going to get the absolute path of what? Well, of whatever we pass it. And I'm going to pass it just a dot inside of quotes, single quotes. I'm going to pass it that, and basically what I'm saying is make an absolute path to the location that this script is in. and it's going to return that. And I'm going to store that, for lack of a better word, well, not a better word, but just to keep it simple, I'm going to save that reference in a variable called mdir. Okay, so this is going to represent this directory right here, the t-shirt sayings directory. That's what this is going to return. Now, the next thing that we need, if you remember, we had the, and I cleared it and I should have left it there, we have this base directory. Well, we want to create a path to that. So I'm going to do that one next. I'm going to call that bdir for base directory, and that's going to be equal to os.path.join. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this directory, which is the one that has the program in it, and we're going to put that as the first parameter, and then we're going to join a child directory to that. What's the child directory? Well, it's the base directory. It's that folder, this folder right here. So what we're doing is we're joining a directory called this to the actual location of where this is. And so when we get it back, it's actually going to be a path object to this base folder. So we're going to do the same thing for the data and for the output. The output's where the t-shirts with the names on them are going to end up, and the data is where we're going to pull the names out of that CSV file. So let's create those two now. This one's going to be called ddir, and it's going to follow the exact same. Everything's going to be the same in it, even the mdir, because base and data are both in the same parent directory. And we're going to call this data. And I'm just, for the sake of keeping this not so monotonous, I'm going to just copy that and change the name of the variable to odir, which is short for output directory. And we're going to make the output directory joined to that main directory. So that's going to give us the paths to each of our directories that we're going to need to get files out of or put files into. Now another thing, it's not really going to be an issue in this script because we already have all these directories created, but just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do is, let's say we want to make sure that all three of these directories actually exist before we go and reference items in it, put items in there, or pull stuff out of it. Well, one way that I like to do it is just create a dirs variable that represents all the directories, and I make a list and I put bdir, ddir, and odir in that list. Now this list, if we were to print this out, let's just do that, because you might be surprised at what's inside of this. This is going to have full file paths in it. So if I save that and come over here and I run this program, which by the way is running inside of a virtual environment, you can see there. If I run this program, you'll see that this list is the full paths to each of those directories. So it's not just, it's actually the full path on my machine to each of those directories. And that's basically what we're storing in this list. Now, we want to make sure that each of those directories actually exist. So what we're going to do is create a loop. We're going to loop over that list of directories, and for each directory, in that list of directories, what we want to do is do a check to see if os.path.exists. What are we checking to see if exists? The directory. Each directory, as we loop over this list, each one of these we're going to check and see if it exists. Now, written the way this is right now, it would check, this would return true if the directory was there. But we're looking to see if it's not there. So if it's not, if the directory is not there, then what are we going to do? Well, we're going to os make dirs. And what that does, we're going to make that directory. So if it's not there, we're going to make it. Now, like I said before, this isn't really, you could skip over this if you have all of the directories created like I do, but just to test this and make sure that it actually works, what I'm gonna do is let me open that. Okay, so here's what we're working with, and I'm just gonna delete this output directory because it doesn't have anything in it right now. It's empty. So let's just pretend that it's not there and make sure that when this code runs, that it notices that there's not an odir and it creates an odir, an output directory. Let's just ensure that that is the case by running the script. Okay, so I still have my print statement because I didn't save the change. Which is something I do quite a bit. So, alright, let's run that again. It looks like it, and it did. It created the directory. So there's no errors that break this code yet. Give me time though, and there'll be one. So right now we have our script that's looking to make sure the directories exist, and if there's not an output directory, it creates it. So that's a good place to be right now. So what do we want to do next? Well, we need to set up references to the actual locations and names of the files that we're going to be working with. And so we're going to do that next. So to do that, what we need to do is set up some variables for the file names that we're going to use. And to do that, we just need to know what files we're going to use. And if you remember, we're going to be working with a names.csv file. We're going to be working with a font file because we've got to write the names with a font, and then we're working with image files in this base directory. So we're going to need these files, these file locations. We're going to need this file location, and we're going to need one of these. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can download whichever font you want to use off of google.com, Google Fonts. And I just picked this one because when I did a search and sorted them by popularity, this one came up at the top, and I think I had one other filter on it. The filter was handwriting. I wanted something that resembled someone's handwriting. So this is, at the time of this video, this one was the most popular handwriting font, so that's why I selected it. So we have those files, and the one we're going to use, by the way, is this one, dancing script dash variable font underscore w GHT, true type font. You can use any true type font, but they're going to vary in size, and you're going to have to play with the sizing a little bit to see how well each one fits in the script. So if you go with a different font, you're going to have to make some adjustments, most likely, to the script. But you just download the font. It's a zip file, and then you extract it, and then just grab the one that you want to use and put it in your fonts directory. And then when you set up these font file location, or these file locations like we're getting ready to do, you'll just put yours there. So the way you reference file paths is basically the same as what we did up here, only instead of adding text for the folder name, you add text that represents the name of the file. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the font file reference here, and we're going to do os.path.join, and we're going to join this not on the main directory like we did up here, but we're going to join it on the, I didn't create a font directory, did I? You probably were yelling at your monitor when I was doing that, but let's create that here. We need a font directory. We need a reference to the font directory as well, so I need to set that up. And it's the mdir, it's in the main directory, so we put its parent there, and then here we'll just do fonts. I think it's called fonts. So now we have the fdir that we need right here, and we're going to put that right here, fdir. And what's the name of the font? Well, the name of the font that I'm using, and actually what I should do is just come over here so I don't spell it wrong, and right click it, select all, and copy that. I don't want to close that because I might reference it later, and then I paste that in there. So now this is going to point to the location where this file is at, and it's going to include the file name. So now we need to do the same thing for the other files that we're going to be working with. And the other one I said was the CSV file, so we're going to do that with os.path.join, just like we did on the other one, only this is the data directory, and the name of that file is names.csv. Now, just a side, not necessarily a side note, but I just want to point something out here. I don't have a spreadsheet program on this computer, but CSV files are just text files. It's just text that's formatted in a certain way. And so you can create a CSV file with any text editor. That's one of the things that makes working with CSVs, as well as JSON files and even XML files for that matter, that's what makes working with them so nice, in my opinion, is because you don't need any specific programs to open them. They're not, they're just text. So to create this CSV file, or one like it, all you have to do is create your column names up at the top. Just type your first column, which mine's called name, and then a comma, and then immediately after the comma type your next column name, and so on and so forth, how many ever columns you want. And then underneath that you create your rows, and you just create a value for each column that you defined at the top. So you'll see here that every one of these lines has two pieces of text, and the pieces of text are separated by a comma. Now that's a very shallow description of a CSV file, but if it's all text and there's no like spaces in between, Like if we had names in here that had two words, two-word names, then this would look a little different. It would have quotes around the ones that had two names in it. But just to keep it simple, I'm using a file that doesn't have all of that complexity. But a CSV file is just a text file, and you can create one. You don't even have to have Excel or some other spreadsheet program. You can just create them with text. So that's it for that side note. So we're working with this text file, and we're calling it NFIL for the names file. And then we have one more that we want to use, and that is going to be a list of file names, because you remember that our base files, there's 3 different ones. So I'm going to create a list called BFLS, and it's going to be 3 items long. And these are basically going to be the base 1 image, which is a JPEG. And then we're going to have base 2 and base 3. That's what those images are called. These are the blank t-shirt images. You remember I named them base 1, base 2, and base 3. And basically what we're doing is we're just using these names right here, because we're going to randomly pull these out of this directory. So that's what we have stored in this list. So now that we have our files and our directories all defined, our Python script, when we start referring to these things, it's going to be able to find those easily. It knows where it's going to know where they're at and where to find them, and it's going to be easy for the program, the interpreter, to find those files. So now what do we want to do? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to open those names, this file right here. We want to open this file, and we want to read that file line by line, because we can't make a t-shirt without names. We got to have the names that we're going to put on each t-shirt. So we want to loop over that CSV file, and to do that we need to define we don't need to do it here, but I normally do it here. I just create a variable that represents the row headers or the record headers, the name and the gender columns. That's what we want to put in here. So this CSV file that we're going to read has 2 columns in it, and the headers are defined as name, and if you remember, I mentioned that it had another one called gender, and this is why I pointed that out, because that CSV file has 2 headers, and we want to make sure we list both of them in here. You get some weird results if you leave one out, so don't create a file that has, well, I wouldn't recommend creating a file that has extra headings in it, because if you do, you may get some weird results if you're not using all of those columns in your script. So since we listed both of them here in this variable, our program is going to know. It's going to know that there's 2 values for each record that we're going to loop over. So now what we want to do is we want to use a context manager to open these files. And the way you do that is with the with keyword. So we're going to go with the file that you open, and you're going to open that file as the read file is what I want to call it. So open this file. What file? Well, the one we're going to tell it about right here. So we want to open the name file. That's this right here. And this is defined by this code, which says, hey, look for this folder, or look for this file inside of this folder. And this folder is defined up here. So we've kind of built on the code above everything to this point. But we did that so that when we get down here, all we got to do is type in these 4 characters. So we're going to open that file. And when you open a file, you have to open it in a mode. And the mode that we're going to open it in is the read mode, which is just the R character. We want to open it in that mode. And you don't have to do this with all CSV files, but I recommend getting in the habit of doing it, because you're going to run into cases if you work with very many CSV files where you're going to need to do it. And let me just show you, I should have left this open. Let me just show you real quick what I'm talking about. If you open in Notepad, if you open a CSV file and you look right down here in the lower right hand corner, you'll see that this is in UTF-8. Now what that means is this file is encoded in UTF-8. I won't get into a big long explanation of what that means, but it's just know that different files are created with different encodings, and it can trip you up and cause problems. So as you work with files going forward, you're gonna pick up on errors that happen because of the encoding. It has to do with the characters that are used in the file, and what languages, and different languages use different characters and all of that. So I happen to know that when we open this file, we want to open it with an encoding of UTF-8. So I'm going to just type that in here. Again, you could leave this out and it would open it with this encoding by default. And then the other thing that you want to put in here is you want to tell Python, when you read this file, don't use a new line character at the end of every row. Because if you don't put this in there, what you'll get a lot of times is you'll get when it reads the file, it will automatically put a new line character on the end, and then you'll get an empty record. So unless your file has a new line in it at the end, you want to put this in there. So what we're saying here is open this file at this location in read mode using this encoding, and don't use any new line characters. And we want to call the variable that we're going to reference it with RF, or read file is what I think of. That's why I use those 2 letters. You can use whatever you want there, but I use RF for the read file, the file that I'm reading. So then what you need to do is you need to read this file. And to do that, you just come down here to the next line and you type a variable name. I usually call it reader. And you want to make that equal to CSV dot, and we're going to use a dict reader for this. Now a dict reader is a dictionary reader. It reads dictionaries. Actually, it reads the CSV file, and when it reads the file, it reads it with the rows being dictionaries. And it takes 2 arguments, takes 2 parameters when you create a dict reader. Well, actually, I think it only requires 1, but I always use 2. Very seldom do I ever use 1, and it kind of goes back to this up here. If you're not using all of these and you don't tell the dict reader what the columns are, it can get confused in certain cases. So I give it the file that I'm reading, and then I tell it, and by the way, these are the headers. These are the header elements for that file. And the reason why that's good is because when the dict reader reads the row, it's going to create a dictionary out of the elements in that row, and then you're going to be able to use it. Now here's something that you want to keep in mind. If we were to just start using this data out of here, the very first row is going to be the headings. And we don't want to print headings. We don't want to print a shirt that has the word name on it. We want to print somebody's name. So we basically want to skip over the first line in the CSV file. And to do that, you just reference the variable that has that is the reader, and you type a dot, and then you use what's called a dunder method, which is a double underscore. And the dunder that you use is called next. So you just skip over that first. As soon as you open this, immediately go to the next row. Don't read the first row. So now the cursor or the file pointer or whatever you want to call it, it's looking at the second row in the file right here. And this is where we want to start our loop. We want to start reading the file here. So for R in that reader, so for every row or record, for every R in the reader, then what I want to do is I want to do all of my work. Basically, I want to select a image out of the list of images and get that file. I want to open that file up and use it as a base image, and then I want to draw using a draw object. I want to write some text on that shirt, and then I want to save the results as a new file. So that's what we got to do inside this loop. But before we start working with the images, we need to ensure that we have this library installed, this module installed. Now, even though it's called PIL when we do the import, the way that you install it is you just come over here, and while you're in your virtual environment, if you're using a virtual environment, I am, so I'm just going to ensure that I'm in that virtual environment by typing pipenv shell, and it's active. All you have to do is use pip to install the module that is called Pillow. Now, if you want to learn more about Pillow and some of the other things that you can do with it, it's basically for working with images in Python. And you can check out the documentation. Just do a search on Google for Python Pillow, and you'll get a result that shows you the documentation page. But this is the command that you use to install Pillow. So I'm going to pip install Pillow and hit enter. And it will go out and it will get a copy of it and it will install it. And then you can clear your screen and you should be good to go. So now we'll continue on using the PIL library. And we're going to be using the image draw, and the image font items from that library that we just installed. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to get one of the base images every time through. And so we're going to set up a variable called base image path. Okay, so this is going to be the base image path. And we're going to go back and use our handy os.path join. We're going to use that same syntax, and we're going to open which directory? Well, we're going to open the base image directory, this one right here. This directory right here is the one that has the shirts in it. And so we want to open that directory. But which of the shirts do we want to get? Well, we could get a specific one. We could just write BFLS 0, and then all of the shirts would look the same. But I thought it would be nice to kind of randomize this a little bit, so we've got 3 of them. Now, how do we get these randomly? Or more accurately, how do we get these pseudo-randomly? So it's going to appear random, but it's not really random. That's a story for a different time, but for all practical purposes, they're random. So we're going to pull one of these out randomly each time we go through here. And that's why we imported this random module, is so we could do that. Now, if we were to just get the name of the file randomly, we would type random.choice. We would use the random module and we would call choice on it, and then we just simply have to tell it what list do we want to randomly pull an item out of, and that's the BFLS list. That's this list right up here. So we're randomly pulling one of these items out of this list. Now what that's going to return, it's going to return that string, but what I find myself doing, if you're passing something here to this OS path join, you may not have to do it this way. You may be able just to run it like this. But what I normally do, it's just a habit that I've gotten into, and maybe I shouldn't be doing it this way, but this seems to work for me, is I put this in an F string, a formatted string, because really what we want to pass is we want to pass that as a string. Now, it's already a string up here, but there may be cases where you have something like this, and these are not strings. Maybe they're something else. Maybe they're a file path or something, but you need them to be strings right here. So what I normally do is just format this as a string and then call it done. So basically what we're saying here is build me a path to this file, and you'll be able to find it inside of this directory. And then what we get back is the base image path. Now after the base image path, we also want to create or open that image using this path. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a variable called base image, and that base image is going to be equal to what? Well, we're going to use this right here that we imported. We're going to use this image object from Pillow, and we're going to open that image. So we'll type dot open, and it needs to know what image we're opening, and it's going to be able to find it at the base image path, this right here that we just defined. So using this path, give me an image, give me the image that's at that path, is basically what we're saying there. And then we want to draw on the image, so we need a draw object, an image draw object, and we're going to call that variable draw, and it's going to be equal to image draw, and we can't just pass that item information. We have to call the draw method on it. We have to tell it, hey, draw this. So this is the object, and this is what we're telling it to do. And we're going to pass in, what do we want to draw? Well, we want to draw this base image. Well, that's the image we want to draw on. So we're going to pass that in, base image there. Now, what are we going to draw on this image? Well, we're going to draw some text. So we need to keep track of the text that we're going to write. The text that we're going to write is going to be what? Well, we're looping over this reader, and each time through the list we're doing we're doing this series of commands every time for every row. So what we want to do is we want to get the name out of each of these rows, and that's the text that we're going to write. Now the way you reference that is, remember I said that up here we're using a dict reader, so that means each row in this reader is actually a dictionary. And the way that you refer to an item in a dictionary is you just type the name of the variable, which is R in this case, and then you use square brackets and you just type out the heading value. So we're saying, in this record, give me the name value. And if we wanted to do gender, we would do that a different way, but, well, we would do it the same way, but we would type gender in here. But like I said, we're not using gender. I just simply included it so that I could point this out, this idea about including only what you're going to use. If you're using a dictionary and you give it the headers like we're doing, it's not going to be a problem. If you don't include the heading here, then you'll run into issues with your data not lining up right. But the way we've done it here, you shouldn't have that problem. So we've got our text to write. Now what do we need to do? Well, we got to figure out how to get that font. So how do we get the font that we're going to write the text in? Well, remember, it's in this font directory, which is right here now that I put it in. So it's right here, and we have a font file right here that's defined using that font directory. So basically we just need to open this. We need to open this thing right here. So we're going to create that font path, and we're going to do that with what, well, let's just call it font path. The font path is what? Nice and short, FFIL, because we defined it up here. So what this is going to be is it's going to be a path object to this file, but now we've referenced it. We have a reference to it in that variable. The font size, you may have to, like I said earlier, we have to have what size to make the font in order to do the next step. So you may find that you have to test the sizing, but I've tested the sizing on this, and I know that 90 is going to be a nice size for the script, for the font that we're using. So I'm going to set that to 90, and then we have to create a font object. You recall up here we brought in the image font object or class, and what we need to do is we need to create a font object with it. So we're just going to call that font. We're going to use the image font, and we're going to create a true type font with it. Now the true type method, you got to spell it right. The true type method on the image font, it takes, well, we're going to use two parameters, font path and font size, and we've defined both of those right above this. So it takes these two items here. So that's why we created them, because we're going to pass it in to this method to create this font. So now we have a font, and we have the text that we're going to write. But how tall is the font? Well, we need to record that because it's going to come in handy. And we're just going to create a variable that's called text height, and we're going to say that the text height is going to be whatever the font size is times 1. And what this means is you basically set the height of the text to how many ever lines of text you're writing. And since we're only writing 1 in this script, you only need to multiply the font size times 1, because we only want 1 line of text. Well, now what we've got to do is figure out how to position this text on the t-shirt. Now if you remember, I said that I set this up so that each of the t-shirts has the area that we're going to print on. That area is the same in each one. So this is the part that is simple because, well, it's not necessarily simple, but it's easier because of that prep work that's already been done in the files that I'm using. So it may be beneficial for you to do a little bit of prep work for the images that you're using to get the area that you're writing in lined up so that you know exactly where your text is going to go. At any rate, what we need to do is we need to get the text width and we need to get the text position. So the text width, we're going to create a variable for it, and the way we're going to create that variable is we're going to use that draw object that we created right up here, and we're going to use text length, that method on it. We're going to use that method and we're going to pass it 2 parameters. The first one is the text that we want to write. So we're going to pass it this right here. And then the second one, we need to, this is a named parameter. And I probably should have called it something other than font up here. I should have named this something else, because this name parameter, if you're new to this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. But what we're saying here is this parameter, in Python you don't have to pass the parameters in any specific order, not all of them. Some of the parameters you can pass in anywhere you want, but if you do, you have to tell it which one you're passing in, and that's what we're doing here. We're saying, hey, the font parameter that you're expecting to get is equal to the font variable that we set up here. So that's what we're doing here. It's kind of confusing. I should have called this something else. Like I could have called this FT. Maybe I'll just do that. I'll call that FT for font, and then down here we got to call that FT. So basically what we're saying is the font is whatever's inside of this variable. Maybe FNT is better. That looks like I'm saying foot. So you get the idea. This named parameter equals that value, which is a variable. So that's what we're doing there. Text width. Now what we need to do is position the text, and we're going to create a variable for that called text position. And what's that going to be equal to? This one's an interesting one. It's what's called a tuple or a tuple. You'll hear it called both things, but it's a tuple of tuples. Actually, it's not a tuple of tuples. It's a tuple of actual expressions, but we're putting these inside of parentheses. You'll see why here in a minute, because of the order of operations. You'll see why we're doing this here in a minute. So what we're going to do is the first value in this, so everything right here to the left of this comma, which is what separates these two parts of this tuple, everything inside of here or everything to the left of this comma we're going to do. Now what we're going to end up doing is we're going to divide whatever's inside of here by 2. So we need to put that there, and we need to do the same thing over here because we're going to divide the height by 2 as well. So basically this text position, it takes a tuple, and the first value in the tuple is we want to give it the starting location as far as the x axis, which is left to right, and then the second one is the height, or the y axis, which is up and down. So we're basically saying here we're going to say the base image. Okay, so that's what this image right here that we opened, Python knows how wide this image is. When it opens it, it figures that out. So it knows what the width is of that image. So we're going to reference the width of that image by typing the name of the variable the image is in and saying get the width property of that image. Now we can't just go by the width of the image. We have to take away whatever the width of the text is, because you have to allow for the text to be written. So we have to take the width of the text off of that image, and this needs to be inside of here. So that's the reason why we had all these parentheses, because we want to do this before we do the division. If we didn't have these in here, it would divide the text width by 2 and subtract that from the width of the image, and that's not what we want to do. So the next one is we're going to do the exact same thing, only we're going to do it with the height. So the base image dot height, right, minus the text height, and we're going to divide that by 2. Now the text height, you recall, we set right up here and we based it on the font size, and we said that this is basically the font size times how many ever lines you have. So what we've just done here is we've defined a region of the image in which the text has to be written. So it knows the width and the height of, well, it knows the upper left hand corner and the lower right hand corner of where we want to write that text. I believe that's what we're telling it. I'd have to look that up, but we're defining a region with these 2 values. So we have a rectangle defined on the image where we're going to write this text. So now that we have everything set up for writing the text, what do we need to do? We need to draw that text. So we'll tell the draw object, hey, draw that text. Now, where do we want to draw it? Well, we want to draw it in the text position that we defined. And what do we want to draw in there? Well, we want to draw the text to write. The text that we want you to write, that's what we want you to draw. And what color do we want to make it? Well, we're going to just stick with the fill. This is another named parameter. We're going to stick with a fill of black, but you could put any color in here you wanted. In fact, you could build on this up here, this random choice. You could build on that and just make another list like we did up here with the file names. You could make a list of colors, and you could randomly put random colors on there. We're just going to stick with black for now, but you get the idea. We've demonstrated how you use random.choice to get one item out of a list. So you could just transfer that way of doing things. You could use it down here and do the same thing with the color. And then what we want to do is we want to pass it the font that's called what? FNT is the font now because we changed the name of it. Alright, so now we've created an image with some text on it at this point. But now what do we want to do? Well, we want to save that image. And to do that, we're going to need a shirt file. That's what I'm calling the variable, shrtfl. And again, we're going to use another f string, formatted string. And the reason why I'm doing it here is because there's a variable that we're going to use, and we're going to tack it on the front of some text to create a file name. So what we're going to use here is the text to write. Now what this does is it creates a unique image name for each item that we're creating. Because this text to write is unique every time through, we can just use it as part of the file name, and that'll help us identify which shirt that file is. Now, the way it is right now, this is going to write it in capital letters, so if you wanted to shorten, not shorten, but lowercase that, you could just put the lower method on there. I believe you can do that inside of the, well, let's try it. We may get an error here, but let's try it and see if it works. I can't remember if it does. So that's what we're going to call our files. It's going to be the person's name -shirt.jpg. So what is the result image path? Well, it's going to be, the result image path is going to be another os.path.join expression or statement. We're going to basically join this file name to the output directory to make a file path. So the output directory is called ODIR, ODIR, the output directory, and we're going to pass it the name that's in this variable, the shirt file name. And then all that's left to do is take your base image, take your base image and then save that thing, save that resulting image to the result image path. So now that you've saved that, you don't have to do this, but I always like to do it. I like to print out at the end of my scripts some sort of feedback that tells me that it actually got to the end. And if you get to this point without hitting any errors, then it saves successfully, and that would be very exciting. So I'm going to put an exclamation point on the end of it. Alright, so other than spelling this wrong, I don't see anything that stands out as an error, but Python will help us to find that out when we run it. Now I'm going to, just in case it doesn't have any errors in it, I'm going to open the output file just to show you right here as we run this script, and hopefully we don't have any errors in it. But if you saw one and you noticed it, then you're probably going, well, this ain't gonna work. But let's see. If I run this, oh my, It worked. It's working. See, it's creating all of the images. And then it gets to the very last statement and it breaks on the thing that's supposed to indicate that it worked right. And that's just I was getting antsy because we were reaching the end, but you can see that this script as we have it written right now, it works. So what we have here is we have a folder full of shirts that have a person's name written on them. And how many are in there? Well, if we just point to if we just open this, look, there's 257 items, it says in there. 257 items in this directory. So we just randomly created 250 t-shirts that have a name printed on them that we could use for a website. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that you can do. You can just kind of, you can expand on this, but this gives you an idea of how easily you can create multiple items that are very similar but have to have some sort of unique aspect to them. And you can do it very easily just by using a Python script that you write to basically create multiple images with text printed on them. So I hope that was more exciting than the basic ones that I've been doing, but this is basically an example of something that's exciting that you can do with Python, and hopefully it helped you. If nothing else, it shares with you the idea of some of the things that you can do with Python. So again, I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.